That's the Nigerian Central Bank sold $600 million at the WDAS this week. However, the naira closed slightly weaker despite dollar supply from oil companies to 161 naira 58 kobo against the dollar. Meanwhile, the bond market saw some modest demand with yields dipping marginally. Well, to review activities in the Nigerian fixed income and money markets, I'm joined by Jide Alo, an analyst at Stanbic IBTC Asset Management. Thank you so much for joining us, Jide. Well, let's start with the OMO auction. Now, lately, the CBN has not sold at OMO auctions, mainly because investors put in high bids. Now, we see now that there is a successful bid, but at 13.20%. Now, would you consider that a high yield?
I think it was a decent yield at 13.2 levels is quite good given the current market dynamics. Yesterday, the market opened with a 99 billion naira liquidity level, and there was going to be T-bill settlement of 70 billion, and CBN planned to sell 70 billion 224 days maturity with the OMO, but eventually sold 102 billion. And as a result of that, in the T-bill segment, we had initially seen yields inching upwards because the market wasn't certain whether or not CBN was going to sell. But once the results were announced, we then saw yields backed down somewhat and then closed the market at a flat level, given the opening levels for the same day.
All right, now the bonds, still at 13% level rather. Some will consider this an attractive level. I mean, are investors bullish on it?
I think the activity we are seeing in the bond segment is not as much, unlike what we see with T-bills. At 13% level, I think what we are seeing are just a pocket of investors taking bit-size exposures, especially at the short end of the curve. But our expectation is that should we see yields go up to 13.5, 14% level, then we might see increased participation by local institutional investors. And that's our current reading of the activity we see in that segment.
Now the naira has been under so much pressure of late. I mean, with the CBN interventions being short-termed as it depreciates after gaining. Now, where do you see the naira going rate-wise? And secondly, do you think the CBN is aggressive enough about defending the naira? I mean, the naira is at 161 naira 58 kobo.
I think the body language of the CBN with regards to defending the naira is very clear, and they've been able to match they've been able to match that body language with effective action. In Q2, we saw an increase of about $1 billion sales at the WDAS segment compared with the 2.89 billion that we saw in Q1, and a lot of that happened in the second half of Q2. So over the last 1 month, we've continued to see CBN come into the market to inject supply towards ensuring that there's sanity in that segment of the market. So in our estimation, we think that the body language of the CBN is clear and they are matching it with effective action. So at the WDAS segment, we expect that the rate would largely remain flat at about 155.7 levels. Whereas if you look at the interbank segment, I think that's where we're likely to see a lot of volatility. But CBN would continue to inject supply as at when necessary. You recall that we still have a robust external reserve of about 13 months at a level of $47.3 billion. So we think CBN is effectively equipped to inject supply into the market. Our reading is that we should see rates remain around 160 naira to 163 at the interbank segment, but at the WDAS level, it will likely remain flat, at least in the short term.
Okay, now the July bond auction calendar reveals a modest issuance of 55 billion naira, at this month's auction, thereby generating secondary market interest, thus contributing to the momentum we're seeing in the markets.
I think the calendar is as expected. The government had indicated at the beginning of the year that they were going to reduce local borrowing and substitute that with more of foreign denominated borrowing, and we saw the issuance of 1 billion euro bond at the first week of this month. And so I think the market largely expected the calendar that we saw. So I don't think we're seeing much activity as a result of that. I think it's more of the dynamics in the global segments that is actually influencing the local activities that we are seeing right now.
Very well.